July 11th. Welcome to the second 25 years of the Hugh Hewitt Show. If you missed yesterday's show, that was my 25th anniversary of launching this program on the Salem media. And I just want to say thanks to all of you who missed yesterday who are regular listeners. My first guest, as we are lucky on most Fridays to have, John Ellis. He is editor-in-chief and founder of News Items, which I consider to be the most valuable newsletter and probably the one you ought to buy first. John, we've had 4 or 5 new affiliates since I last did this. Would you explain to them what News Items is and what the benefit of them getting it at 7 a.m. or even earlier, sometimes 6 and 5 in the morning is?
News Items is a newsletter that covers 4 subjects. One is a world in disarray, which is basically war and things that look a lot like war. The financialization of everything, advances in technology and science, and politics, foreign and domestic. And the basic idea is we'll find 4 stories that we think are either the most important or the most interesting stories in those 4 buckets. We'll do all the reading for you, and we'll deliver it to you at 6:30 a.m. Eastern Time.
I just got to tell you, it makes my mornings fly by, and it gives me a lot of focus for a show that doesn't start for 7 more hours. Now, John, today you sent me a list of the biggest stories of the week, and I was kind of surprised by your first choice, Elon Musk's avowal of a third party. Why did you rate that as one of the 4 stories you thought most important this week?
I've been interested in third party politics, if you will, going back all the way to Ross Perot. What makes Elon, we don't know if Elon's going to go forward with this, but if we assume that he does, what makes it impressive is that he has so much money that he can put behind it. There was an article or a column in the Washington Post, the headline of which said, there's a lot of supply, but there's no demand for a third party. There are a lot of supply of candidates, but there's no demand for it. And the exact opposite is true. For decades, Gallup has been polling this subject, and roughly 60%, give or take 3 percentage points, say that a third party is needed in the U.S. because the Republican and Democratic parties, quote, do such a poor job of representing the American people. So the demand is there, and the question is whether Musk will create something that meets the demand.
All right, my one question to you, he is somewhat of a new arrival. You and I have been doing politics. I've been doing it since 1976 on the presidential level, and my first campaign was 1974. It's like sports. Either you do it and you love it, a team or a division, and politics is the same way. You forget stuff in your sleep that you've known forever, but you still know a lot. Do you think Elon's got the base to do this with?
I think that, no, I don't think he does, but I think he has the money to underwrite, a serious effort. Now, my own view of third party politics in the U.S. is that it's inevitable, but that it will start at the local level, state representative, state senate, governor, certain congressional races. It's not going to, I mean, the way it's talked about is that it's going to be, Elon's going to support somebody who's going to run for president, and that'll, upset the apple cart or whatever. But, if it's going to take hold, it's going to take hold at the local level before it goes national.
All right. Story number 2 you sent me has to do, and I was stunned by this. U.S. power providers are trying to impose big price increases on consumers. Utilities have sought regulatory approval for $29 billion in rate increases in the first half of 2025. This is, of course, because of growing energy burdens driven by the AI demand. Now, traditionally, the answer to high prices is high prices, meaning energy production will come online, but that's not really possible here, is it?
Well, we have a grid that is capable maybe of, providing 2 or 3% more juice every year. And you and I are consumers of the electricity, and we pay our utility bills and so on and so forth. And every so often, very rarely, there's a brownout because the demand, because of air conditioners and so on and so forth, creates a shortage. What we're dealing with here is you have the commercial and the consumer side of the business using the electricity that it uses. And then you have now these data centers from artificial intelligence companies that use huge amounts of energy, and they don't, it's not, it's not at 6 a.m. or 8 a.m. or 10 p.m. It's 24/7. So they're constantly pulling power out of the grid, and that creates a shortage. And so what we see now are these, it's 142% increase over the last year. And so the question is, how is this going to sort itself out politically? Because you have huge tech companies that are essentially, eating up all the juice that you and I need to run our air conditioning, to watch TV, whatever. It's going to be a major political issue.
I think the answer is small modular reactors, but there's got to be some regulatory reform to allow that if it's coming.
Yeah,
Then we
that's
went
right.
on. Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead. You agree?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, the problem is just to get the turbines to do natural gas fired energy, there's a 5-year waiting period, right? It's sort of mini nuclear plants, but that's not going to be online until 2030, 2032. This is an immediate problem, and the solutions are 4, 6, 8 years away. So it's going to be a major issue, I think.
I hope people at DOE and Interior are working on it. I know the secretaries are. Then scraping. Now, I'm reading a book this week. Dan Silva's got his new book out, An Inside Job. First time I've ever seen a notice in the beginning of a book. The material in this book is not available for search engines and scraping, something like that. And now I know why, because scraping's been going on forever, and people are trying to fence off their information. I didn't realize this before. It's from the Journal. It's an interesting story. I missed it.
Yeah, the scraping is, when you and I first started using Google, we would say, where can when did Hugh Hewitt start his radio show on Salem? And Google would spit back, 7 or 8 stories about your starting your radio program on Salem. And then we could choose, the source that we wanted. And that was good for the source because they got traffic, and that made them able to charge more for digital advertising. So scraping in the old Google search way was a good thing, at least a better thing than what is now coming to pass, which is you ask the same question about Hugh Hewitt and Salem Radio. AI goes out there and they deliver a brief that tells you exactly what happens, but they're not driving any traffic to foxnews.com or the newyorktimes.com. They're synthesizing all that information and bringing it to you by themselves, if you will. And so all of those ad dollars go away. If you look at, Fox doesn't really have this problem, but if you look at sort of second market, quote, newspapers, end quote, their revenue sources are subscriptions and digital advertising. And so you're looking at a situation where all of their digital advertising dollars disappear. And that's a big deal.
That's a disintermediation. Last thing I want to get to, because I'm very encouraged by what looks to be President Trump's direction on Ukraine. You sent it as one of the big stories of the week. What do we think the story is?
Well, we'll know on Monday. He says he has a big announcement on Russia on Monday, or he said that yesterday. I suspect that they'll crank up the sanctions as high as they can, and that they'll deliver weaponry through NATO to Ukraine. I think Trump thought that Putin would at least play some kind of ball. He clearly has not. And I think it's switched the president's thinking on how to proceed.
I remember Dick Cheney. I looked into his eyes and saw a KGB colonel. I think everyone eventually realizes he's a KGB colonel. John Ellis from News Items, thank you for joining me once again. To my new audiences, if you buy any website, if you buy any newsletter at all, It's better than a newspaper subscription. It's better than any other newsletter. Just Google news items and John Ellis. It will take you over to news items. Very reasonable cost. Every single morning, you're smarter than your neighbor and everyone else you know if you just read news items. Thank you, John. I want to remind everyone of the disaster in Texas. And over at the top of HughHewitt.com, you're going to see an appeal from our partners, Food for the Poor. Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I celebrated our anniversary by making a contribution, not to ourselves or to any of our friends, but to help Texas via Food for the Poor. And I would encourage all of you to go and do the same. The devastation there is so extraordinary that we have made room for Food for the Poor to come on and run a campaign to try and get help to our neighbors down in the Lone Star State. Lots of you have been asking me, how do we help? Food for the Poor is staging out of San Antonio with a longtime partner. It's up and it's running, and your money will be put to good use. Stay tuned, but go to HughHewitt.com, hit that banner, help Texas. The Week in Review, Josh Kraushaar joins me, editor-in-chief of Jewish Insider. Josh, the biggest story of the week was the dog that didn't bark. Prime Minister Netanyahu went to the White House for the third time in 6 months. It's really kind of a record. And we were all leaning in for an announcement. We didn't get one. What happened? What do you expect to happen? And when do you expect it to happen?
Well, Hugh, it was quite an eventful week. The three visits in the last 6 months, right after the Israeli strikes and the American strikes against Iran's nuclear program, were made for a very eventful visit. But you're right, no deliverable, no big announcement when it came to the possibility of a ceasefire. Now, I still think, and everything I've heard, everything we've heard from the conversations between the White House and the Israeli Prime Minister, is that that's still very likely to happen, but it's not going to be some grand deal. Most likely what we're going to be seeing is another exchange of, or I should say, we're expecting about ten of the surviving hostages to be released, Hamas prisoners perhaps getting released, and then some, small movements perhaps in Gaza. But there's not, within the Bibi coalition, there's still enough resistance to any kind of grand deal that would, at least end the war and kind of, move the page forward and try to negotiate with the Saudis and other allies to probably add to add to the Abraham Accords, which is, I think, a big priority for many in the administration and some in Israeli government. But I think the big thing we're going to be watching in the next week is some kind of partial deal, a ceasefire in which maybe half of the surviving hostages being held are released as part of some partial deal.
You know, there is that passage in Scripture when Abraham is walking along with the Lord, and he said, if I can find 10 people. And so I keep thinking of that we started with 250 hostages. Many have been tragically murdered or killed in the course of this very long war, down to 20 living hostages. You get 10 out. You're really getting down to where Hamas has got very little leverage left, even though one human life is infinite. And I think they're running out of gas. They're cut off from the mothership. And so it just takes some patience. What I'm really looking for is sort of the declaration of concession by Iran and Hezbollah, because they've both been banged up so badly by the IDF. Am I wrong to be an optimist about that?
Well, as far as Hezbollah goes, number one, very notable that they didn't do anything during the 12-day war. That they were silent. They've been defeated and now, degraded to the point where, like, I think the big worry in Israel is that there was going to be, before the war in June, if there was going to be a war, that Hezbollah would be a big threat to kind of fight this multi-front challenge. And Hezbollah was totally taken off the table, which is, I think, a major accomplishment. The big conversation in kind of Arab in Lebanon, and I know Steve Witkoff was in the region recently. It's what role does Hezbollah play in Lebanese government, and how does that affect their militant and terroristic aspirations? That's an open question. I think the Americans have been a little more sanguine about Hezbollah's role than the Israelis, but certainly they are not the same Hezbollah as they were before the pager operation, and it's been pretty significant. And frankly, the fact that Iran has been degraded and defanged as a result of the 12-day war, the strikes against their nuclear facilities, they can't support their proxies in the same way as they could before.
I listened to Jonathan Shanzer this morning doing the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy's morning report. I had no idea the kind of cash problem that Iran has. Iran's out of money, and their GDP has collapsed, and now they've been embarrassed to the world. That's a regime in crisis. Because it's such a closed regime, I don't know that we really get a sense of how much crisis they're in. Do you think we do?
We don't have great visibility. I think a lot of times it's easy to. We saw this with the Soviet Union, Hugh, back in the 80s. I think a lot of the smartest intelligence analysts didn't realize how precarious the regime was before it collapsed in the late 1980s. So we don't have a lot of, I think, great visibility into the inside workings of the Ayatollah's regime. Certainly, I mean, it was an embarrassing defeat for them. Israel could kind of, and the United States could operate without impunity in taking out a lot of the top targets during the 12-day war. They don't have the finances to support their proxies. Most of the proxies that have been threatening Israel have been defeated thoroughly in the region, and that's a huge. I don't think we fully process these regional developments that could and are very likely to lead to a new world order in the region, and maybe lead to peace, and lead to things that have been unthinkable in the recent past. I mean, Syria and Israel are talking about some type of peace agreement, or at least diplomacy, which was unthinkable as long as Bashar al-Assad was in that.
It's such an excellent point. I've spent 50 years watching the Middle East, and more changes happened since the massacre than in the 48 years prior. So it's really something. Let me close with this, Josh. I don't do other countries' politics. I watch it, but I don't try and predict it because I'm not even very good at doing my own country. When are they going to go to elections in Israel, do you think? And
Well,
what do you think of Netanyahu's chance?
yeah, I'm sort of upset. I mean, and I do know a little bit about American politics, but I always hate to extrapolate to other countries' politics. But it's kind of fascinating with Netanyahu. He is the big question in Israeli politics is, does he call for elections at his high point? I mean, he's gotten a boost in the polls because of the great success against Iran during the last month's operations and the military successes. But he still is, not where this party not where he needs to be to feel comfortable about winning re-election. So all the we wrote about this in Jewish Insider last week, but all the smart people in Israel believe Netanyahu's going to maintain his coalition. It's been a little shaky at times, but maintain it into the 2026 elections. I don't think he's going to call early elections. And he's been spending a lot of time making sure that the right wing, and that's part of the peace process, the part of the negotiations going on, making sure that the right is still in the government and doesn't cause it to collapse. But I think that's going to happen, and I think we're probably going to have elections on their normally scheduled timeline in 2026.
I think it would be better to go in with an expanded Abraham Accords and normalization with the Saudis if possible, but we will see. Josh Kroshauer, follow him on X at Josh Kroshauer and at Jewish Insider. Thank you, Josh. I've made the switch to consumer cellular, proving that you do not have to sacrifice savings for service. You can have them both. All you have to do is call 1-800-411-4454. And before you call 1-800-411-4454, the number is there on the channel on the screen if you're watching on the Salem News Channel. Get your old invoice out, all right? ConsumerCellular.com/Hugh. That's the new way to get directly to the special deal that new customers get. ConsumerCellular.com/Hugh. New customers get a $5 credit on the first 5 monthly invoices. All they have to do is visit ConsumerCellular.com/Hugh or call 1-800-411-4454. Remember, if you're over 50 and you're one of those people that want unlimited data, you can get 2 lines of unlimited data. Keep the old number, add a new one. You can keep your data, keep your contacts, or get a new device. You can have all sorts of options. 2 lines, unlimited data, $60 a month. And you might not need unlimited data. You might need 5 gigs, 10 gigs. Get your old bill out before you call 1-800-411-4454, 1-800-411-4454, and use my promo code HUGH25. ConsumerCellular.com/Hugh. Fridays, this is my want. I try and gather in a couple of smart folks from around the D.C. and New York world to go back over the weekend review. One of those is Charles C.W. Cook. He is the senior writer for National Review. He's a frequent contributor to the Editor's News podcast, and he is the host of his own podcast, the Charles C.W. Cook podcast. which is among the more eclectic podcasts out there, Charles. I think you do mix it up a lot. I want to start with the story about John Brennan, what John Ratcliffe wrote about what he discovered, and the referral to the Department of Justice and the announcement that a criminal investigation had been opened. Do you think that's a significant story, and if so, why?
Oh, I certainly think it's a significant story. John Brennan has been at the heart of American politics for a decade now. He's always struck me as a deeply unpleasant person. He's always struck me as somebody who toyed around the edges of propriety. So yeah, that's a big story.
It is a big story, and it also ought to be, I think, an easy question for justice to decide. He testified to Congress. They have a report from the CIA. If the former reveals that it was included lies on the basis of the latter, you charge. Do you think it could be quick, unlike pretty much everything else we've gotten used to in the United States involving lawfare?
No, I think it should be quick. I mean, look, we drag our feet on these things. People on the inside don't want to prosecute each other, and we're actually really quite bad at exercising congressional powers. Lying is a big deal. Uh, Denying subpoenas is a big deal. But we only ever seem to well, you have to have the right party in charge and the right moment and enough of them to actually get anything done. So no, I don't think this will be quick. I think this will be dragged out. What I do think is that, irrespective of how long it takes, this has put a real damper on his reputation. And I hope people will stop listening to him. So even if it takes 5 years to resolve this, I hope people will stop listening to that man because I do think he's a bad news.
I think he's always cast a sinister shadow across American politics for reasons that are numerous, and I would like to see it resolved. Second question, story in the Wall Street Journal today. Trump's unsung economic booster, deregulation. Are we paying enough attention, Charles C.W. Cook, to efforts to deregulate everything?
No, we're not paying enough attention to it. It's a huge story. Unfortunately, two developments have obtained since the 1930s. It's got worse in recent years. One is far too much federal regulation per se, and two is too much federal regulation that occurs at the executive level. The good side of this is that when you get a president who wants to deregulate, an awful lot can be done without Congress because an awful lot was done in the first place without Congress. Now, if you go back to Trump's first term, he had some rubric. I think it was for every regulation that we add, we'll get rid of, was it 3 or 4? Now it's 10. He wants to get rid of 10 now for every one that is added. That is necessary. And it's not just necessary because I don't like regulation, although I don't, but it's necessary because the presidency needs to be a key player in undoing an awful lot of the thicket that has been laid for 50, 60, 70 years now. So this is a great start. It's going to help enormously. It's something that Barack Obama and Joe Biden never understood. They wanted economic growth, but they just couldn't grasp that one of the biggest impediments to that, in addition to obvious things like tax policy and so forth, is regulation. And they have a huge amount of power now to deal with it. I'm glad Trump's doing it.
Within your understanding of Article 2, the president's powers as commander in chief, they got a big bump of money, 158 billion in the one big beautiful bill. A lot of it's lined item out, but there's a lot of discretion. Do you think it's within the president's power to simply reprogram money to where he needs it to be in the Department of Defense, even if it's been appropriated to a general line item, because he's the commander in chief, Charles?
I think it depends how general it is. This is one of those difficult questions that lies in the details. If Congress said, for example, and I'm making this up, it doesn't exist, but we wish to build a F-60 aircraft and it has to be capable of this range and delivering this payload and it should operate in this region of the world for this purpose. And then the president takes the money and says, well, instead of that, I'm going to build a bunch of boats. Then no, I don't think that's acceptable. I do think, though, there comes a point at which if you've allocated money for defense and given it to the commander in chief, who has a great deal of discretion over tactics, and the in the field details, then yes. So I think that's one of those issues that really depends on the detail, but there's some latitude there and should be.
I'm looking at three stories from today. From the Washington Free Beacon, Columbia nears deal with Trump administration. University will pay discrimination victims, reveal more admissions and hiring data, but will dodge harsher measures. Then there's a story on the Trump staffers who set out to reshape their alma maters. A couple of staffers going after UVA and Harvard at DOJ. And then from the Wall Street Journal, Harvard explores new center for conservative scholarship amid Trump attacks. Now, they've focused thus far on Harvard, Columbia, and UVA. If they do 3 or 4 investigations or prosecutions for violation of civil rights law every 6 months, they might make a dent in higher ed. Are you an optimist about that?
Yeah. I think because it's coming in conjunction with the public's realization of what our institutions of higher learning have become. Trump is not so much running against the tide here as running with it. Now, he will run into a wall in that the universities will fight tooth and nail to keep what they have built. But if we wanted to construct a system in which private universities were truly private, I would be interested in listening to that proposal. But we don't have that. And since 1964, and then with the subsequent amendments, we have exercised as a nation a great amount of control over our universities if they took a single cent of public money. You do have exceptions, Hillsdale, for example. The idea that this can only be wielded by Democratic presidents with their particular, and I think often wrong, interpretation of civil rights law is absolutely bizarre. You hear this all the time from progressives. Oh, how dare he go after this private institution? Don't give me that. They've been doing this for years with these universities. You finally have a president who is willing to stand up for the real interpretation of civil rights laws in many cases. And they hate it, but they should hate it. So I think he's going to find it difficult because they will fight tooth and nail. But I think, yeah, he should keep going. He'll make a dent. He's got the public behind him. I don't think people want Harvard or Columbia to behave the way that they do.
Now, Neil Ferguson out at Stanford doubts whether the Harvard approach to trying to create their own Hoover institution will work. He thinks it'll be segregated, a sort of apartheid for the conservatives. Anything is better than what they've got. Now, you're an Oxbridge guy. I'm a Harvard guy. I went there when it was normal. Now it's a left-wing indoctrination center. I don't know what's happened at Oxbridge. I'm not optimistic that they can reverse this without a whole of university approach. A minute, Charles, till we come back on. Do you think they can get it done if there's the will to really make them genuinely diverse?
Well, I think it's a matter of starting where you are and looking for modest improvement and then working from there. So I think the way you put it was right. I think if they keep firing away, they will make a small improvement. I'm pretty optimistic that these centers can make a big difference. I've been looking at the ones in Florida and in Texas, and it's not just that they occupy a certain space in the campus, but then students who aren't necessarily of that persuasion go over and they see how open-minded and interesting people are, and then it opens their mind. So they don't necessarily need to take over the whole college to have a big impact.
I'm with you on that. A week ago tomorrow, President Donald Trump signed the One Big Beautiful Bill, which only required 50 votes of the Senate because J.D. Vance added a 51, and it passed, and it's been signed into law. Here's the kicker. We can do that 2 more times under the rules. Simple majority in the House, simple majority in the Senate. My guest is Charles C.W. Cook. His podcast is the Charles C.W. Cook Podcast, senior writer for National Review, contributor to the editors. Charles, if Speaker Johnson can get the Budget Committee to get together and do a budget, and the Senate can do a budget, and they can unlock, what would you like them to do in round 2, much less round 3?
Whew. Well, what I would like them to do and what they're likely to do are often not the same thing. I mean, I think there was a lot of good in that bill. It really was enormous. It encompassed spending, it encompassed the reconstitution of the tax cuts, some changes, increase in the defense budgets, border spending. So the difficulty that obviously involved has put me in a modest mood. What would I like to see? I'd like to see some more changes to spending, more slowing the growth. I don't think they really did cuts, but more slowing the growth. I would like to see a rescission package where the recommendations that were made by Doge are made formal by Congress. I would like to see some further changes to regulation. We discussed that are made permanent so that they can't be reversed, having been reversed next time a Democrat's in office. But look, the reason I sound modest here and I'm struggling a little bit is I just think when you have the margins that they have, and when you have not yet got an agreement from the public to address the elephant in the room, which is our massive runaway entitlement spending that there seems to be no end to in sight, all that you can do in the short term is try and get the best policy that you can. And that was the purpose, not always the success, but that was the purpose of the big beautiful bill. It was to say, what's the best tax policy for the next 10 years? What's the best spending policy for the next 10 years? And they did the best they could with really narrow margins. A lot of the good stuff got taken out or watered down. So I don't know what room there is for big conservative change, but a rescission package, some congressional deregulation, I'd be happy enough with this Congress.
I'm trying to socialize the idea of one minor change to one entitlement, just to prove that it's possible and that it does
Sure.
not electrocute the body. For example, you're under 55, so this would apply to you, would not apply to me. For everyone 55 years and younger, you're going to work till you're 66. And by the way, we're going to raise the retirement age 1 month every year for the next 60
Yeah.
years, so that eventually you're going to retire at 75 after 60 years. Do you think that would cause a rebellion, even though the Democrats would try and make it a deal? Or do you think the American people realize we really do have to change the trajectory?
I mean, first off, I think that's an excellent idea, and it's something we should have done a long time ago. As you know, well, the reason the age is 65 is because that was the age at which most people died in 1935 when
Right.
Social Security was passed. The fact that we have never raised the age, even if we said we will do, 1 month every 2 years as of the 1960s, it would have sorted itself out. So I think it's an excellent idea. I do think that there would be a significant rebellion. I do think at the same time, we are probably not too far away from people recognizing there's an issue. Automatic cuts will come in if we don't fix this problem, and they will be far worse than whatever Congress will get together and do instead, or worse than the idea that you just posed. So probably the first thing to do is to start building the case. I wonder if there would be enough votes in the House for a plan like that. But I mean, I completely agree with you. I don't understand why we're sleepwalking into this. What you have described would not be radical. It would be completely sensible. It would be slow. I know a lot of people of my age, I'm just about 40, who don't think they're getting any Social Security anyway. They just say this as a matter of course. Well, I'll never see it. Well, okay, well, then you should be strongly on board with very slowly fixing it, right? What's the worst that can happen? But it's just such
But
a
as you
third
get
rail.
closer to 55, you don't want people to mess around with it. And I'm way past 65. I don't want them to change it. I put all my money in. But if they'd
Yeah.
begun 30 years ago, like we did with the federal pension system to move it from a guaranteed contribution to from guaranteed benefit, the change would be over. Long, slow change is a wonderful thing. It's like compound interest.
Yeah.
It's just that
Well,
I think.
and I don't want to pay the taxes either. I mean, that's the thing, right? Is that I agree with you. People don't want the change. They don't want it to go up from 55. But if you look at how much tax would need to be paid to make it solvent, people don't want to do that either. So they're going to have to choose one.
Or faced bond vigilantes. And I've been trying to talk a lot about that. And I don't really think Americans know enough or worry enough about that. Do you think they know what that is? And it happened in London to Liz Truss. It can happen to us.
Oh, people haven't got a clue what that is. I don't say that disparagingly. People are busy with their lives. I doubt 1 in 10 people could tell you what the bond market was, let alone the downside risk here of not dealing with our fiscal situation.
It is enormous. Charles C.W. Cook, thank you for joining me. Follow him on X at Charles C.W. Cook. Sign up to like and follow the Charles C.W. Cook podcast, as well as National Review. The editors, always entertaining. Always a diverse group of people talking about a lot of different things. Thank you, Charles. Let me remind everyone about American Federal. They're a great sponsor. They buy and sell gold. AmericanFederal.com, AmericanFederal.com. I'm looking for the gold price right now. And gold today has gone up $46 an ounce. Now, I didn't expect that. That's up 1.4% to 3,372. Markets just before the close are down a little bit over the yesterday. The Dow's down 0.5%. The S&P down 0.25%. NASDAQ down 0.16%. So why does gold jump so high? Why does it go up 1.4%? I don't know. The gold market moves because of massive purchases by central governments in response to planned moves by their central banks in response to a variety of things. All I know, if you want to diversify your portfolio, you should do it with Nick Grovich and his team at American Federal. Call them at 1-800-221-7694. Great sponsor of our show for many, 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 many thousands of you. You love Nick and his team. 1-800-221-7694. Diversify your portfolio and do it with people you can trust at AmericanFederal.com. 1-800-221-7694. President Trump is down Caryville, Texas. Can we get a picture of that? A little bit of sound, if possible.
That
President
store
Trump
was
talking.
just really amazing.
Yes, Mr. President. First, let me correct. Was owner of that store from 2013 till April of last year, where I actually sold the store to Haley and BB Lehrman, who are excellent operators. And
Down
they're
there,
on the
right
ground
in the
now
heart,
behind.
doing everything that a president did, rallying people, trying to get them involved in the recovery efforts, trying to bring attention of the country onto it. We're right there with him. Food for the Poor called up and said, can we sponsor a campaign? We said, absolutely. Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I are donating this weekend. The banner at the top of HughHewitt.com is Help Texas. It's our friends at Food for the Poor. They have a distribution center in San Antonio. It's up, it's running. Every $50 that comes in, another relief kit goes out to a family that's been devastated by this extraordinary natural disaster. And it's the kind of stuff you expect. Food and clothing and nutrition, a lot of diapers, a lot of wipes, a lot of sanitary products just to keep clean. Some, protein bars, the regular stuff. It's not elaborate, but it makes all the difference in the world. I especially like that they include coloring books and crayons and crafts for kids because they're sitting around with nothing to do. They've lost everything. It's a little bit of love for the people of Texas in the Hill Country. So you can call 855-359-4673. That's 855-359-4673. You can text my name, Hewitt, Hewitt, to 51555. They'll send you a link from which you can give. Or you can just go to the banner at the top of HughHewitt.com. Thank you for helping out. Our audience always does step up, especially when Americans are suffering like this. Let me also point out to you this Relief Factor Studio. Got my 10K in this morning. That's 2 in a row with a third one coming tomorrow. Weather, time, and tide permitting. And 100% back thanks to Relief Factor. 3 weeks ago yesterday, bent over, did the wrong thing with a box of books throughout my back. Took 2 weeks to get back. This week it was 4 and 4, then 6 and 6, and tomorrow, hopefully a pretty good time for a 10K. I'll let you know on Monday. But I take my Relief Factor, if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, like Carrie Nicker Kumin, who's Veritron Omega, every single day. In the first hour on the show, because I like to prove to you, it's the only supplement I've taken for more than 20 years. I have been asked repeatedly, would I endorse a different supplement? Would I take another supplement? They offer to pay me a lot of money, and I don't want to do it. Everything I recommend to you on this program, whether it's American Federal to buy gold or andrewandtodd.com to get your mortgage, I've used them, and I use Relief Factor every day. I always want you to remember, I'm just 1,000% authentic with you. If I say give to this people, I give to them. If I say use this product like Relief Factor, I use it. So please call and give it a try. 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. Or go to their website and find the starter pack for $19.95, less than $1 a day, at relieffactor.com. Relieffactor.com. Welcome to the first day of the second 25 years of the Hugh Hewitt Show. We celebrated our 25th anniversary yesterday, so it's 25 years plus one. Starting off hour two, Ben Domenech, editor-at-large for The Spectator. He's also the host of the Big Ben podcast, which I was honored to be asked to be on this week. Ben, about Big Ben, there need to be more of them. They're really good. Are you having fun doing it, or is it too much work?
You know, it's funny that you would say that because this morning I had a meeting about making more of them.
Oh.
Yeah, no, I'm aiming to at least get up to 3. I think Monday, Wednesday, Friday would be ideal, and so I'm having fun with them, and I think that folks are enjoying them, and so thank you for coming on and joining us. One thing that I do have to say is, it's a hard thing because I don't think I have actually ever interviewed you before. And so the only problem with interviewing you, I realized, is that your breadth of knowledge is so great that you always feel like you leave things on the table. And so I did want to ask you one question, which is this. The thing that really comes out for me of this, past 6 months of this administration is I am not sure that in the last 40-plus years we have seen an administration do as much as they have done in this 6-month period, just in terms of the dramatic shift in policy change and everything else that's come from it. Now, maybe you have a difference of opinion on that.
No, you can be sure. I went back and looked at the first 6 months using AI of every president since Carter, because I wasn't around when Nixon came in 72 or when Ford took over. Of course, he did the pardon. But beginning with Carter, every president, no one has come close to this 6 months. It is objectively much more, which brings me to my first question to you. Can he keep it up? I mean, do you think the momentum is meant to be used? If you let momentum go away, it goes away. Do you think he can keep it up?
I think that they can to a certain degree, Hugh, but I do think that this is going to be a real test to see sort of how this flows out, because we have seen so many administrations in the past that got caught up in different hang-ups, including, by the way, even after the momentous sort of win that he had at the time. Barack Obama just got caught in a slog in a major way, and was never really able to recover from that. Now as someone who has a difference of opinion, I'm happy about that, but it's also the situation where, can you believe the amount that they've been able to achieve in this time, that they continue it going? I frankly think that they can, in part because the Democratic Party right now is so caught up in its own internal fractious nature between their hard left socialist wing, the people who want them to get back to a point of winning pro-business independent voters, trying to appeal to the kind of constituencies that they did in the past, and the people who are just set on the idea that they can essentially become a majority party once again by appealing only to these rich, white, socialist-adjacent people who, seem to have completely different priorities than the rest of the country. I mean, it is really a problem for them, and I don't think that they're going to be able to solve it in short order. I think that this is going to be something that continues through the midterms, only because Democrats are not going to be able to get their house in order.
One of the people you might interview, I've got Newt Gingrich on next week. He was going to come on yesterday, but I think he had an accident of some sort. Nothing serious, but he was postponed a week. He's got a new book out called Trump's Triumph about what needs to get done. There's a lot in there. There's a lot he could choose, but he's got to choose and he got to focus. I was struck by the fact Speaker Johnson said we can do 2 more reconciliations, which means simple majority in the House, simple majority in the Senate. And do you think they would dare do something? I hope they would. I do want them to plus up defense again. I do want them to add to regulatory reform. But could they bend one entitlement a little bit? And for example, is Social Security. The retirement age is 65. Could we kick that up to 66 and then start adding 1 month every year for the next 60 years? Could we do that?
This is the most obvious. It's the most obvious thing in the world, and it's the kind of thing that I frankly think that for my generation, which believes pretty wholeheartedly that this is not going to be around for us
With good
if
reason.
things continue as it is.
Yeah.
That we have to start plussing it up. We have to start taking these steps towards gradual incremental change in order to make this a program that is even going to exist in the next couple of years. And look, this Social Security, when it was invented, was never supposed to be around forever. It was not supposed to be something that was coming in at a point where most people are continually working, are continually sort of being active. And part of the issue here is just the expansion of lifespan and everything else that comes with it entails upon us a burden that says, hey, we've got to plus this up. We've got to make this something that is going to be able to endure. And I hope that this is something that will at least be entertained. Unfortunately, I think that there's a lot of I heard Rand Paul yesterday in a segment before me on Stuart Varney talking about how the only thing that really needs to happen in order to actually have some kind of entitlement reform is to send about 100 members of Congress to chiropractors to have them installed with metal in their spines in order to actually affect a change. And he's not wrong about that. So there's a lot of...
The biggest obstacle is President Trump made a commitment not to touch entitlements.
Yep.
Now, there's some space there. If you do things that don't affect people unless they're 55 years and younger, you're not affecting entitlements.
If we have time to plan, we will plan. This is the thing.
This is it.
Yeah. Americans pretend like as if especially these scaredy cats on the Republican side, they pretend as if Americans don't change their behavior based on government policy. Well, you know that they do, and the simple fact is that they would change their behavior and they would change their investments based on this. Look, I'm hopeful, Hugh. I think that this is the situation where we have a unique moment in time. A dysfunctional Democratic Party that can't get its act together, a Republican Party that has a narrow window in which to affect significant change. And I think that they should take advantage of that and press things toward the things that need to be done, that we all know need to be done.
Now, Newt argues in his book, and I've already read it because he was supposed to be on yesterday. One of the things is there have been 3 occasions where the first off-year election, a president increased his numbers in the House of Representatives, and one of those was in 2002, which is the election following 2001, so it's an outlier. Do you think the Republicans could actually expand their majority in 2026?
I think it's a very hard path, Hugh, but I think it's not something that is out of the realm of possibility. And I also think that this is something that requires some leadership on the part of Speaker Johnson and of the Majority Leader John Thune to demonstrate to us that they can take advantage of this moment and lean into the things that they believe about this bill in a way that sells it to the American people, because I don't believe that sale has been made yet. I agree.
And everyone's so astonished that it's done. No one has taken time to do a victory lap. Of course, the president is doing what he should do. He's in Texas today with the grieving and the suffering, and that's what he should do. But then they ought to start selling the win.
They've got to start selling the win. And this is the thing that we observe, from the outside, which is that they have not been making the case for what is going to come out of this. All it's been is just trust us. The economy is going to improve if we pass this. They have not been leaning into the things that they've actually accomplished with it. And I think that if they do, and if they then have the trickle-down effect of that going to people who are running in more competitive races and in blue states and the like, in blue districts, they are going to be able to, I think, take a hold of that and really make a case for it. The Democrats have been playing in an open field on this for the last several months. They have been able to go to their friends in the media and say, this is a terrible thing, it's awful, it's going to hurt people, etc. I hope you saw that video of Scott Jennings and Richie Torres
Oh, yes.
that happened just the other day, because Richie Torres basically just admitted he doesn't know what he's talking about, like on air,
On air.
on CNN. And it's like, your job is to know what the CBO is saying about Medicaid and the number of people who are taking advantage of it who shouldn't even be able to qualify for the program. And he was admitting that openly. That's the kind of thing that Republicans need to be leaning into.
Scott Jennings should have a lower third that says cable assassin. That's what he ought to have, just underneath there. It's cable assassin. Nothing else. Scott Jennings, West Virginia or Kentucky, cable assassin. Ben, 3-story today on Friday from the Washington Free Beacon. Columbia nears deal with Trump administration. University will pay discrimination victims, reveal more admissions and hiring data. Then a story in the Washington Post, the Trump staffers who set out to reshape their alma maters, about staffers going after UVA and Harvard. And then from the Wall Street Journal, Harvard explores new center for conservative scholarship amid Trump attacks. Neil Ferguson out at the Hoover Institution is against segregating conservatives in their own little igloos on campuses. But this is a sustained attack across elite universities. I'm hoping it accelerates, that they do 3 or 4 every 6 months, bring a new investigation, open a new civil rights case, and crush elite universities back into normalcy. What is your hope or fear for this?
Look, first off, I do understand the concern that Niall Ferguson and that, like a number of other people, I think, share, that that the result of this could be kind of segregated little, hovels within universities, essentially, where they hire a couple of token conservatives to prevent this type of backlash. But I think that in reality, I think the problem has gotten so great that students, donors, and alumni are all aware of this now in a way that they were not even just a few years ago. I think that they are aware of the fact that these institutions are working at odds with the people who are going to be guiding the future. And I mean that not just in terms of economics or academia. I mean it in terms of politics and culture and everything else. These institutions thrive based on the assumption that they are raising up the next generation of leaders within every different avenue of American life. And the fact that they have proven that they are not doing that they are instead raising up the next generation of Zohran Mamdanis, that they are going to be in a position where they have their alumni turn against them. I went to William and Mary. My wife went to Columbia. We value, higher ed, as something that, is a goal. We are not of the mindset that, our children necessarily need to be, disabused of going to any of these institutions. But I will say that I have, the last several years have won my argument that Columbia is not on the list.
Oh, Harvard's not on my list. I went to my reunion and I said to my granddaughter, pick a different school. I'm 100% with you, but find somewhere else. Do not go there. And maybe it'll change in 5 years. But
exactly. And I think that there is we need to make these things good again. They are institutions that have historically attracted people from around the globe to come here who are some of the best and the brightest, and then they stay here and they build companies, et cetera. They have a positive effect on our economy. We need to get back to that. But
who knew Maha meant make Harvard great again? Ben Domich is still with me, editor-at-large for The Spectator. He is the host of the Big Ben podcast, available wherever there are podcasts. And you really ought to like and subscribe it, download it, follow it. I was honored to join it this week. Ben actually knows what he's doing. I always tell people there's a cohort of 40-somethings coming up. The fellows over at Ruthless, Mary Catheringham, Guy Benson, Ben Domenech, Ben Shapiro. The conservative bench is deep, but we got to get them spread out and covering the waterfront like algae on Lake Erie when I was a youth. Let me go to what the most satisfying story of the week for me, Ben, and then get your take on its significance. D.C. and the Beltway. John Brennan has always struck me as a sinister character. And this week, John Radcliffe, who's always struck me as a straight shooter, and I know John a little bit, and a very serious man, referred Brennan's testimony to Congress from 2023 to the DOJ following a CIA internal review that led the current director of the CIA to conclude that Mr. Brennan had lied to Congress. That's a felony. It's 18 U.S.C. 1001. The statute of limitations doesn't run until 2028. What do you think of this? How important is this? Is this revenge, or is this the kind of delousing that the agency needs?
I don't think it's revenge at all. I think, Hugh, that this is the kind of thing that is healthy. In a democracy, in a democratic republic, you need to be able to have confidence in these institutions, that they are clear, that they come forward with honesty, that when they stand before the Congress of the United States, representing the people of the United States, that they tell the truth. And they have the compunction, the hubris, repeatedly to lie to Congress and to pretend like they're not lying to the American people by proxy. And that's the thing that just has always infuriated me, and particularly about John Brennan, who has participated in numerous actions over the years that I thought were worthy of censure and that kind of thing. But look, the simple fact is we're not going to have any confidence in these institutions until we have clarity, until we have sunlight, until we have an understanding of what actually was going on in terms of their testimony, in terms of the things that they said to us via our representatives. And for Brennan to go on to MSNBC and elsewhere and to say, I have no idea what this is about. This is just, unfamiliar to me. To proclaim naivete and innocence is absolutely absurd. Instead, I think he needs to be begging our forgiveness for the kinds of claims that he was making repeatedly to the American people and to our representatives that turned out to be false, that turned out to be unjustified. And look, Hugh, you and I think we have the same view of this. We want to be able to trust our intelligence services. Like we want to be able to have an intelligence services that come to us and say, when they claim something, that we can have faith in them. But we can't have faith in them as long as these kinds of bad apples and these kinds of political actors exist who lie to us repeatedly about, President Trump and about Hunter Biden's laptop, about everything else under the sun, because they believe that they know better about who ought to be in charge of our country.
Now, full disclosure, I think Jim Comey kind of beclowned himself and isn't worth prosecuting. I think Jim Clapper was like Curly in the Three Stooges. I really think it's Brennan. And I think John Brennan,
I've not heard that Curly comparison before, but that fits, actually.
It fits. Well, yeah. And so the three things are, what did he say? What does the CIA say? If they don't match up, prosecute. And it shouldn't take forever. And it ought to be in the Northern District of Virginia, not the District of Columbia, because Langley's in Virginia. And I would like it to be either closed quickly and said there's no here. And if there is a case, I'd like it to be brought quickly, because justice delayed is justice denied. And he might be innocent. All right, I don't know. I haven't studied it enough. I think he's sinister, but that doesn't make him criminal.
Yeah.
I would just like to get it done.
We need clarity. We need the ability to know what happened in these instances. And my feeling about John Ratcliffe is the same as yours. I think he's a straight shooter, and I don't think he would have brought this up if there was no there.
Now, there's only one thing that makes me worry about Ratcliffe. I caddied for him once, along with O'Brien and George Glass, our ambassador to Japan. I don't play golf. The guy shot a 74 and he missed 6 birdie putts. That's a dangerous person, if you ask me. If they're someone who I don't know, he's 50 years old. No one should be doing that at El Dorado in the desert. Ben Domenech, follow him at B Domenech. Listen to the Big Ben podcast. Ben, by the way, you've already got ads. It's remarkable. Is this thing taken off, the Big Ben show?
We're doing great. Apparently, I'm told we're doing great, and I'm looking forward to where we build from here. And look, Hugh, I appreciate you coming on. It's always a pleasure to chat with you, and I'm hoping for bigger and better things, and really, showing people the kind of conversations that we can have in the podcast environment.
Yeah, see you on the radio next Friday, but keep podcasting because it's changing the way America learns, and that's a very good thing. Let me now turn to our friends in Texas. I don't know if President Trump is still down there, if we can bring in the live feed while I tell people about Food for the Poor, and we'll just put the picture up there. President Trump is in Texas today with First Lady Melania Trump, bringing attention and some comfort to the people who have lost everything. We have partnered with Food for the Poor. They asked us, can we sponsor a campaign? We said, absolutely. Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I will be donating this weekend. The Help Texas banner is now up at the top of HughHewitt.com. You can call 855-359-4673, 855-359-4673. Many of you trust me to direct you for 25 years, where to send money when bad things happen to good people. Food for the Poor has a great partner and warehouse organization in San Antonio. Ted Cruz is talking. I'm showing you the pictures if you're watching on the Salem News Channel. It's a big roundtable on what can we do. Here's what you can do, no matter where you are in the country. $50 buys a relief kit for one family. And in that are hygiene products, kids' toys, tarps, some granola bar, the stuff that gets you through a day or 2 days in a hotel somewhere. So please go to HughHewitt.com and be as generous as you can to our neighbors in Texas. Doesn't matter if they're blue, doesn't matter if they're red, doesn't matter who they are, what age they are. They lost everything in a natural disaster, and we should help them. Please also don't forget I'm in the Relief Factor studio. Took it in hour number 1. Got my 6 miles in today. That's 6 and 6 with the third 6 coming tomorrow. I'm back after 2 weeks of bad back and grandbaby aggravated bad back, and that's because I doubled down on the Relief Factor, took 2 weeks off, ice, heat, then walk, then trundle, and tomorrow I hope get a good, decent 10K in. Relief Factor works. I've been taking it for more than 10 years. The only supplement I've taken for 20 years. I turn down supplements left and right because I really don't need them. I've been blessed by good health to date. Knock on wood and say a prayer to God. But Relief Factor works, and I recommend it. 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief. 1-800-4-RELIEF. Tell me you want the starter pack for $19.95. That's less than $1 a day. Or you can head over to their website and find the same starter pack. Again, you can take a 3-week supply, 3 packets a day for the first week, 2 packets a day for the second week, 1 packet a day for the last week. Then you're on scale, and you should be feeling great. Relief Factor starter pack is at relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. Eli Lake hosts the great podcast, and I do mean great podcast, Breaking History. Iran did not drop today, Eli, so I'm very disappointed. I want it by tomorrow when I have to do my 10K. Will it be out tonight?
No, it's coming out on Wednesday.
Oh, Eli,
and it's a
Eli.
two-parter, Hugh. There's so much to cover. But I'm really excited. I mean,
I get hooked on podcasts, and then I want more. Okay, I sent you a DM yesterday. I don't know if you saw it.
Yeah.
The John Brennan referral. No, that's right. The John Brennan referral maps on the Alger Hiss case completely. You're one of the few people in America who would understand that assertion. Do you agree with me?
Well, in the sense, do you think that he's been colluding with a foreign power? I feel that John Brennan was colluding with the Democratic Party, is how I would.
No, I think he lied to Congress. That's what I meant by.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Lied
okay,
to Congress.
Right. I do think that I hate to defend John Brennan because I've been such a critic over the years, but when he shaded the truth. What he said to Congress was, the CIA didn't want the Steele dossier to be included in this assessment. And that was true because the CIA analysts thought it was garbage. What he didn't say, which we now know from Ratcliffe's review, is that John Brennan, the director of the CIA, very much wanted the Steele dossier to be part of that assessment. And it ended up being this annex that the FBI director at the time, James Comey, briefed the president on. So we'll see.
You're not a lawyer, but you should be one, Eli. That is shaving it pretty thin. So the
I'm just trying to
agency didn't
steel man
want it, but
I'm trying
Do
to
you-
steel man it
have you-
because I think John Brennan has acted horrifically and has been responsible for something. I think he's violated. I mean, if you want to talk about the sort of collapse in trust in important institutions like the FBI and the CIA, John Brennan is responsible for one of the reasons why so many Americans don't believe the CIA when they say something, and that's not a good situation. We want the CIA to be above our politics, to when they address the public that they're giving the straight story, and this ditto for James Comey. And that to me is the real tragedy of the Russiagate affair, which is that I don't come at it, and I don't think you do either, from the perspective of like a Glenn Greenwald, like let's just burn down these institutions. I'm of the view that we need these
no,
institutions.
The opposite.
I want these institutions
think
to
of-
work. Yeah.
Brennan, Comey, and Clapper are to me the three stooges. Clapper is curly, and Comey is a clown, but Brennan is the puppet master. And I attribute to him great intelligence, but also a certain malice, a forethought that I would just like someone to parse. By the way, you're not a lawyer, but you could play one on TV. Do you think we could? Do you think we could get this resolved quickly? The testimony is the testimony. The CIA report is the CIA report. How long would it take to decide whether or not it's prosecutable?
I mean, this is where I'm not a lawyer, but I would say this. There's a statute of limitations here. And
5 years.
right.
In 2023.
So he testified in 2023. If they get him on that, they can. And again, you're putting me in this position, Hugh. I would like to get back. Maybe we'll never get it back because we've been in this cycle since Watergate, really, where we take the criminalization out of politics and we reserve prosecutions for. I guess what I would say is, I just think that kind of lying to Congress the way that he did, well, how are we going to go back and are we going to apply that consistently across the board? And listen, the Trump administration is well within its rights because this round of politicization or criminalizing politics starts with the so-called democratic resistance to Trump the first time. And perhaps, I mean, I could be persuaded maybe that this might be the FO of the FAFO part of it, where the lesson is learned and people won't do this kind of thing again. But sadly, cycles of norm violations usually don't end that way. And here, kind of going back to an historical reference, I'm thinking about, Tiberius Gracchus and his brother Gaius Gracchus. They violate norms
you're right.
in the ancient Roman Republic, and then in turn their enemies do it, and then in turn, and then by the end you get the triumvirate.
You go
and the
back
end
to
of the Republic.
Marius and Sulla. You go back to the
Exactly.
Gracchi brothers. This is a
Right.
repeating cycle. But if we want to trust Langley, we have to know that they're telling us the truth.
Yes.
Eli Lake, I hope you turn your attention to this, and please hurry up with
Absolutely.
Iran. I really want to hear a two-parter. All right, I can wait for a two-parter. Eli Lake writes for the Free Press.
Thank you.
He's also the host of Breaking History, which is really one of the most marvelous pods out there about everything. Like the rest is history, Breaking History is a fabulous podcast. Thank you, Eli. Shabbat Shalom. Jim Gary is senior writer of National Review. He's also the Three Martini Lunch Pod. I guess you're the host of that or co-host of that. I'm not sure. And
Co-host,
a regular
yeah.
contributor. Co-host. All right. Now, Jim, normally I do Week in Review, and I'm going to do one story of Week in Review, but then I have a twist, a curveball. My Week in Review is your reaction to the referral of the CIA to the DOJ of John Brennan's testimony concerning Russia, Russia, Russia. How significant? What do you expect to happen?
If you had to send a CIA official a criminal referral for false testimony, I think I would have gone with Clapper. Back when there was this a very simple question: does the NSA collect information about Americans? And he said very clearly, no. When the answer was yes, so he just missed it by one word. It was just a little bit off. Yeah. So that only and the fact that Rand Paul would periodically throw blow a gasket over it, but there was no real consequence to it. And so I certainly have no objection to this. If there's it certainly would seem like, look, it certainly seems like the Obama crew when it came to intelligence. Felt like they knew what was best. They knew that clearly there had to be some smoking gun out there somewhere, and it was just a matter of looking hard enough. And if they looked, they would eventually find here is, Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump laughing in a hot tub together or something like that. And, this is how we're going to skew the election and that, and they never did. But they, certainly acted like it was their job to find out, we will find the smoking gun that will prevent Donald Trump from being elected. And that's not the job of the Central Intelligence Agency.
Now, it seemed to me, and I've told a couple of people already today and other folks, this case maps almost perfectly with my personal obsession of the Alger Hiss case, in that John Brennan as a kid was a communist and grew out of it. Alger Hiss was a communist who didn't grow out of it. They both testified by Congress and they both perjured themselves, allegedly in the case of John Brennan, in which case it's a pretty cut and dried prosecution. Testimony's there, the investigation's here, doesn't take forever to get into it. I would like consequences so as to disincentivize people doing that in the future. But the Clapper problem, I think, is the statute of limitations, which is 5 years. Brennan's testimony was in 2023. I'm not sure when Clapper's was, so I'd have to go back and look. Second bigger question. We've got one reconciliation down. Speaker Johnson says we can do it 2 more times with this Congress, meaning 51 votes in the Senate. What do you want the president to aim for in round 2?
Well, there's no getting around the fact that based on the projections, the last big, beautiful bill was going to increase the deficit. I appreciate the efforts of Doge, but you're not going to see closing down this branch office here or letting those workers there are not really going to address the deficit and the debt the way I'd like them to. So, I'd love to see something resembling entitlement reform. I'd love to see something. And by the way, I should point out, credit where it's due, the big, beautiful bill kind of began the process of nibbling around the edges, doing things like, verifying eligibility for Medicaid, things like that. Democrats reacted like these were these terrible draconian cuts and you're, Ebenezer Scrooge throwing Tiny Tim out. And, it was nothing of the sort. Like, if people who are not eligible for Medicaid payments should not be getting Medicaid payments. It's really it's not that complicated. So something that addressed it, because I don't know. Look, there are guys smarter than me who will tell you whether or not the bond market is going to freak out by all the spending we've gotten. But Hugh, you and I've been on your show for a long time. You and I can remember in the Obama years when the deficit hit $1 trillion, and we were like, "Holy smokes, that's a huge number! Wow, this it was a great recession." And they said, okay, it's only because of a really weird set of circumstances. Tax revenues are really down. We have to do all this spending. That it went down a little bit, and then we kind of got into the habit of 1.1, 1.2, up to 2 trillion. Then, of course, COVID hits, and of course, great reduction in tax revenues, great increase of expenditures. Now, I think we're on pace for 1.6 trillion this year, way more than
$37 trillion debt.
Yeah. We just don't. We've never made a serious effort at it, and as a result of it, it never goes down. And the numbers that used to be scary are now very normal. Are kind of par for the course now.
Great minds think alike. I would like them to bend one of the entitlements, if just a little bit. I think the easiest one to bend, and I wanted to ask you because you're under 55, I'm almost 70. If we said, for those who are 55 and younger, you can't retire until you're 66, and we're going to add a month every year for the next 60 years to that retirement, which will get it up to 72 eventually, over 60 years, that would be a big difference. Entitlement reform can be slow, but like a glacier, powerful. What do you think?
Yeah, I have no objection to this. William F. Buckley reportedly died at his desk, and that's how I intend. I don't intend to retire. It's easier to do this when you write for a living. We'll see if my mind keeps functioning as I get into old age, and I'm sure there are plenty of listeners and readers out there who'd say, "Nah, Jim, we're never going to be able to tell. It never worked that well in the first place." But so, for me, the federal retirement age or the recommended retirement age for Social Security, it pretty much doesn't matter. I'll keep working, as long as I'm able to. I'm a little bit frightened about the idea of not getting up every morning, writing the morning jolt, and having that discipline of needing to do something. some guys, by the way, but I'm glad you're doing this at your somewhat advanced age, Hugh, because there are a bunch of guys
my
who,
wife doesn't want me to retire. That's the
Yeah,
key
like,
thing is the fetching
there are some
Mrs.
guys
Hewitt
who-
said, no, 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 don't retire.
there are a bunch of guys who love what they do, decide it's time to hang it up. And I'm not just talking about Brett Favre. They get into retirement and they realize they don't know what to do with themselves. They realize that the work was their sense of purpose. It was their social network. It was how they they feel very lonely in retirement and stuff like that. So I've seen enough of those stories to kind of be a little bit frightened about the idea of just, you can't just play shuffleboard to play golf for the rest of your life. So,
And I
so
don't
my advice-
think-
but the short version is yes, raise the retirement age. I do not have a problem with that. And I think the more, if you're like, oh, you can't do this for 55, okay, do it for 50-year-olds. Do it for 45. Pick a day and say, you know what, you're going to have to wait a little bit longer in life to collect Social Security. We're not talking about a decade later. We're not talking about you having to wait. We'll do it 6 months. We'll do it a year. We'll gradually increase it there. Lifespans are getting longer. People are healthier for longer periods of time. Ozempic is going to make everybody slimmer. We're not going to have back-related and knee-related issues and all these problems that come from diabetes and high blood pressure and weight and all that stuff. People will be able to work for longer. And as a result of that, by the way, all in all, people living longer and needing to support themselves in retirement longer, it's kind of a good problem to have.
It's a good problem to have, and that's we are in agreement on what Speaker Johnson and the President and Leader Thune should be thinking about for Reconciliation 2.0 in Trump 2.0. Thank you, Jim Garrity. Follow him on X at Jim Garrity. Listen to 3 Martini Lunch and the Editors podcast you cannot miss. The Poet Laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show, Tarzana Joe. Hello, Joe.
Hello, Hugh. Listen, aside from your producer, who is not in the office every day, as you know, who else has been with the show longer than your friendly
Adam.
neighborhood poet? So happy anniversary.
Adam and the poet.
Happy next 25 years. And I'm looking forward. I'm not looking backward. I'm not a doctor, and I don't play one on TV even, so I don't have doctor-patient confidentiality to breach, so I will tell what I know. Gavin Newsom had a facelift. His dimples are now stunning, but if you ask the governor, he'll tell you he's not running. He's in South Carolina, preaching to the choir. Dime gets you $1. Next month, he'll be in Iowa. He fought the homeless crisis, and he ran it like a war. And now we have more homeless than we ever had before. He says we need more housing, and he has himself believing he'll solve it with the vacancies that come from people leaving. He talks up his accomplishments in terms of money spent, no matter that his policies didn't even make a dent. A lifelong politician, full of guile and cunning, but as he mentions daily, he has no thought of running. But he has a thirst for power, and he wields it like a king. Before too long, I'm sure he'll toss his hair into the ring. He'll need a staff around him before we start this scrimmage, a team to stroke his ego and polish up his image. There's lots of campaign managers who should be running his, but no one seems to want the job. I wonder why that is. That's Run, Gavin, Run by your Poet Laureate, Tarzana Joe.
Tarzana, I wish to endorse Run, Gavin, Run heartily. I've been in email communication with the governor for 5 years, and he always says he's coming on. He never comes on. So maybe the poem will spur him to do so. I mean, he always writes about, oh, yeah, we'll make that work, and never does. Tarzana Joe at Reagan.com for your poetry needs. If you need a poem, rates are reasonable and summer's slow. I think Joe gives you a discount by only raising prices 20% in the summer. So Tarzana Joe at Reagan.com. This will, Run, Gavin, Run will be posted at TarzanaJoe.com. I assume you are open for business even though it's July, Joe?
Yes, it gets in the way of my golfing every day. But I do get up in the morning, sip my coffee, and write a poem.
All right, Tarzana Joe at Reagan.com for all your poetry needs. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Hugh.
I wish to remind everyone over at HughHewitt.com, we have a banner to help people out in Texas, Food for the Poor. One of the great sponsors of this show for decades has opened up a supply partner in San Antonio. Trucks are rolling in. It costs $50 to feed one family or get one family a box of relief supplies. $1,000 takes care of 20 families. Do what you can, 5, 50, 5,000, whatever it is. You can trust that banner at the top of HughHewitt.com. You can text my name, Hewitt, to 51555, or you can call 855-359-4673. That's 855-359-4673.